So I opened up this clothing store and I started selling. At the time I was married to this British guy who was a tour manager for rock bands. And he introduced me to a bunch of bands like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and all these bands of the early 70s. And they all liked to wear vintage clothing. So I used to save all these fabulous like sequin tops for Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. And anyway, every time they came to town, I would give them these, I'd sell them all these clothing. And then I started making costumes for like local bands. And there was this band called Zolar X, and they sort of came in on the tails of David Bowie, and they wanted to have spacesuits. And they wanted to have crazy hair color and makeup and all this stuff. So I said, well, I can do all that. So I'd give them weird haircuts and I'd dye their hair. And back then we were dyeing hair with carpet dye, believe it or not. Very toxic, but that's what they did in England, so that's what we did in California. So anyway, they said, well, this is all really good. We love this crazy stuff you do, but we really want big brains and pointed ears. And I said, hey, you know what? That's what I really want to do. I'm going to go find out how to do it. So I'm thinking, where am I going to go to find this stuff? Well, back then, we had conventions, and they were Star Trek conventions, because that was really the only thing that was like a fan kind of thing back then. So these conventions were down in San Diego, and this was not Comic-Con then, because the Comic-Con back then was strictly just comic books. It had nothing to do with anything but comic books. But they had these Star Trek conventions, and all of these kids were dressed up in Star Trek outfits and wearing crazy things and stuff. But there were makeup artists that went to them, like Fred Phillips, who did the original Star Trek TV show. And I met Fred, and when I was down there, I also met Rick Baker, who was just starting out like me. In fact, Rick and I are the same age. And I just started talking to these guys. And then I was walking around and I saw these 5 guys dressed up in Planet of the Apes costumes and full makeup. And I thought, holy shit, I gotta go talk to these guys, right? So I said, hey, you guys, where did you get those masks? And they looked at me indignantly and they said, well, these aren't masks, they're makeups. And I said, even better, where'd you get them? And they said, well, we made them. And I said, oh, that's so cool. Can you teach me how to do that? And they all looked at each other and they said, yeah, but you're a girl. And I said, yeah, I know, isn't it fabulous? And so I talked them into letting me come. They lived up in Santa Barbara and they worked in their garage. And I just started going up every weekend, and I fell in love with one of the guys. His name was Steve Neill, and we're still very good friends. And he taught me how to apply makeup, because he didn't really like to do it. He liked to make this stuff, but he wasn't good with people, as most of those guys are. So they just want to be in their little crazy lab and make shit, right? So he found that I was much better at putting it on than he was. So we just started, literally, I said goodbye to the rock and rollers, and I literally just we started getting these little jobs here and there, Like somebody would call up, like Rick would call up and say, hey, can you guys go do this job? I got a call for it, I can't do it. Or just little by little, we started getting these little independent jobs, because people started realizing that this was a thing now, that you could have people make some cool stuff for your movies and go and put them on. So that's what we did. Just little by little, we started getting these jobs, and before you knew it, and then all of a sudden, in the late 70s, they had to open up the makeup union. Guess what? I just happened to be on a movie where I got all my days, and I got in the union. And that's the very long story of how I got in the makeup union to begin with. But back then, they called us 30-day wonders, so I was probably one of the first 5 women to be let into the makeup union in Hollywood. I was the only woman, not to mention one of the only makeup artists that knew how to do makeup effects. So it was kind of a double whammy for everybody. So there was a lot of makeup men who were afraid of me because they didn't know what I was going to do. And they would hire me just to look at me to see what the heck, right? Like I remembered I got hired on the TV show Dynasty. Do any of you have you ever heard of that TV show? With Joan Collins, right? And I thought, okay, well, I'll go in, because I'm just new in the union, and this is what you do. They do this thing called day checking. So you can go in and you work on all these different shows for a day here and there. So he called me and he handed me a bag of sponges and a box of pencils. And he said, go sharpen these pencils and cut these sponges. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not doing makeup? Okay, whatever. He just stuck me in a back room, and about an hour later, I came back with all my sponges perfectly cut, all my pencils sharpened. And when I'm talking about sharpening pencils, these were ebony pencils, like you draw with. we used to use those for eyebrows, for eyebrow pencils. And Fred had taught me how to do it, and used to sharpen them with a single-edged razor blade. So I just sat in there and carved all these pencils perfectly. And when the guy opened up the box, he went, "Wow." He said, "You know how to do that?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He says, "Okay, come back tomorrow." So I stayed on the show for a few days, and then I went away. And a couple of weeks later, he called me back, and he says, "Are you available to come work on the show again?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And this is an older gentleman. He was in his late 60s, and like 20s, nothing, And he said, "We'd like you to do Joan Collins's makeup." And I went, I said, oh, okay. And he goes, you don't really have to do her makeup. She basically does her own makeup. You just have to follow her around with her mirror. And I said, I can do that. I can definitely do that. So I followed her around for 2 weeks with her little makeup kit and her mirror. And then I started working on all these other weird shit, like 8 is Enough, Love Boat. And the young girl that was on Love Boat, she goes, "Oh my God, can't you stay? We have these old guys here, they don't know how to do anything good." I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, thank you, I can't." I'm just here to helping out. I didn't want to get in trouble with anybody, I was new, But that's kind of how I started out, and then little by little, shortly, I would say, maybe about a year and a half or so after I got in the union, Fred Phillips, who did the original Star Trek TV show, called me up and goes, "Hey, V," he says, "you worked with Bill Shatner." And I said, "Yeah, I did a couple little movies with him." At that point, I can't remember one of them, but one of them was Kingdom of the Spiders, a biggie. I said, "Yeah," and he says, "They're gonna make a Star Trek movie. Would you like to come and work on that with me?" And I almost wet my pants. I was like, "Ah!" I went, "Of course I do, Fred. Yes, I'm gonna come." So that was my first big union picture. I did Bill, and I did a couple of other people on the bridge. I did the alien on the bridge with the big forehead, and then I also put together all of the Klingons. So that was my first big feature. I had a ball. It was like 9 months long. It was so long, this movie. And they had taken up just about every stage at Paramount Studios at that point. So, anyway, I don't even remember where this story started.
It's great.
Like I said, diarrhea of the mouth when you get me going.
It's a conversation.
Okay,
it's
fine.
Great. So I wanted to get into a little bit of how you got into the circle of Paul and Johnny and Tim. Were you?
What was the first name?
Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens, yeah.
Were you someone, being in the LA area, were you someone who was in that circle of people around the groundlings and around the IO that, part of that movement that was happening in the early 80s?
Well, let's start with Paul Rubens, because that was probably one of my earliest connections. I was doing a movie with Lily Tomlin called 9 to 5.
Woohoo!
And it was a fun movie. And the camera operator on the show came to me one day and he said, "Hey, V," he says, "I've got this quirky show that I'm producing, and they're going to be premiering it at the Roxy Theater on Friday night." He said, "We could really use some help with makeup. Do you think you can come and give them a couple of pointers and blah, blah, blah?" And I was kind of cool and edgy looking, and he figured this was right up my alley, I think at the time I had red and pink hair, but I'm not sure, and I might have had a bat cut in the back of my head because it was Halloween. Anyway, I know at one point I had a magenta boomerang looking thing, which was actually a big V. But anyway, so I thought, oh God, Friday night, I'm gonna be wiped out, but okay, fine. And the show is at midnight, and I thought, well, whatever. So I go there, and he said, maybe you could help like the Missy Vaughn character, and there's a genie called Zombie, he needs some help, and the rest of the guys are pretty much straight makeups, except for one guy has sideburns on, which he can do, and he said, and don't worry about the Pee-wee guy, because he does his own makeup, and I thought, okay.
So just the description of the show alone.
Yeah, he said it's kind of like he said it's sort of like a little kids show for adults, and I said, okay. So I'm watching this show. After I help everybody get ready, I'm thinking, well, this is a really bizarre group of people. Okay, fine. And they were all from the Groundlings, which is a huge comedy group in Los Angeles. And I'm watching this show and I'm thinking, this is the filthiest thing I've ever seen. I don't know where are they gonna show this? I mean, the only place they can show it is where we were at, right? So after the show, I remember Paul came up to me and he says, well, what did you think of the show? And I said, it's different. it's definitely different. And he said, was it funny? I said, yeah, parts of it were really funny. I didn't know what to say to him. But we hit it off so well because I was so honest with him that we just started hanging out. And I was friends with him, till the day he died, which was very sad for me. But we stayed friends over all those years. And even, like when he was, that whole bad thing happened with him, which was such a freaking disaster. But I mean, when everybody else wouldn't talk to him, I was still calling him all the time. And so we were very good friends. So that was my earliest thing. Then
you knew Paul, and he liked you working on that. Did you do more of the live shows? Did you help out with more of that? Or
well,
just
at
kind
that
of train
point,
them
they
up?
went shortly after that. They went to New York, so I couldn't go to New York. But after that, I was on the Lost Boys, and Bo Welch came to me and he said, V, he says, I just got this script for this movie, and he said, it's so fucking weird, pardon my French. He said, I think you'd be perfect for it. I said, gee, thanks.
And that's a movie that's like two sides of a different coin altogether.
Yeah.
Because it's
here we went from Lost Boys onto, and I said, well, get me the name of somebody in the production office so I can call up and see, if there's somebody there I know. So it turns out that the production manager on Beetlejuice just happened to be the first AD, which is an assistant director, on the film 9 to 5. So I said, Richard, you got to get me in to meet this Tim guy. And he goes, okay, V, it's too early. Just, chill out, go do something else, and I'll call you. I called him every freaking week. And he goes, okay, fine, come in. And I remember when I walked in the office, there was this bulletin board, and they were in the shittiest little production trailer. They had stuck them out on the back lot at Culver City Studios. And it was a Warner Brothers film, but they didn't have any money. And Tim was relatively new. He had done Big Adventure, but I'm not sure if it may have just come out or something, I'm not sure. So he didn't have a big track record. They didn't really know what to do with him because he was kind of a weirdo. So they, stuck him out on this back lot with this movie. And anyway, on this old corkboard bulletin board were these kind of pencil sketches of somebody that looked like just a total derelict digging through trash cans. And I thought, I wonder why that's up there. And then finally I got into the office and I started talking to Tim, and come to find out that was Beetlejuice. And I said, oh, okay. And we just started talking, we hit it off really well. And then about a week or so later, they said, come back in and talk to Tim again. So I went back in and talked to him again. He goes, okay. We started talking about concepts, and he said, and he says, I kind of want the people in the afterlife to be pastel colored. And I said, oh, you mean like Necco wafers? And he goes, yes, exactly, like Necco wafers. And I've come to find out, by the time we saw what the lighting was going to be like and everything, we realized that Necco wafers wasn't going to make it because it was too pale. So I had to make the colors much more vibrant. But I stuck to that pale thing for Beetlejuice because I thought, well, he's in that world, but he isn't really because he's kind of excommunicated, So Beetlejuice, funny enough, was not white. He was pale yellow. But he was so pale yellow, you couldn't really tell unless you saw the color of makeup I was putting on him. But anyway, that's how that whole story started, and I have no idea where we are.
Well, the lucky thing for
that
Tim.
That was Tim Burton, yeah.
Yeah, the lucky thing for Tim and for you was Beetlejuice comes out and you win your first Oscar.
Right.
So you get to be one of the first women in the makeup unit, and then you get to be an Oscar winner for Tim Burton, and all of a sudden he's like, I'm gonna use you for everything.
Well, it did kind of come about that way, which was really good for me. So I did do quite a lot of stuff with Tim. Not every single thing with him, but I did do several things with him. And a lot of it always had to do with Johnny, because he kept inviting me back, because Johnny and I got along really well. So the next picture I did after that was, with him was Edward Scissorhands. And then the next picture after that I did with Johnny might have been Blow, but I can't really remember. Blow, and then of course I did the 3 pirate films, and then the last film I did I do another one with Johnny? I'm spacing out here.
You did
Ed
7.
Wood. We did Ed Wood.
Another Oscar, yeah.
And that was another Oscar, yes, Ed Wood. And then I think the last picture I did with Johnny was Sweeney Todd. And we did that in England. And that was the last picture I did with Tim Burton as well, because that's Tim Burton by then had moved to England, so he does all of his films out of England now, basically.
Right. So I wanted to talk about your 3rd Oscar as well. You got to work with Robin Williams on...
That was my 2nd one.
Well, the 3rd in our conversation.
In our...
Unsequentially. I wanted to talk about, your experience working with Robin Williams on Mrs. Doubtfire, one of his most legendary movie roles.
It was absolutely spectacular. And Greg Cannon designed that makeup, and Greg and I went up to San Francisco to do the test makeup together because Greg was not going to be there to apply. But he said, you got to do it, V. And I said, yeah, I want to do it. And so I went up there and we did test makeup with him, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, Greg, you can't color him like that. He looks like a nasty old man. I mean, that's not what this is about. And he goes, well, I don't know how to do it then, because he wasn't really good at doing women at that point. So we had to really think about this. I said, you know what? I said, you go back to LA, let me do the next test by myself, and I'll paint him the way I think he should be painted. So that's what we did. And I said, it's got to look like this guy does it to himself, number one. It's got to be believable enough that he puts this thing. I don't know what you said, but thank you. So it had to look like he could have been doing it to himself. So I had to keep it kind of simple, but it had to be, he had to look sweet, He was kind of like a pudgy, slightly beefy, older woman, and he was already pretty beefy. Thank God he wasn't too tall, or that would have really been awkward, but anyway, so that's kind of where that all came about. I did the test makeup, and we all said, oh yeah, that's her. Yeah.
Did you have him in the chair for a while, or was that staff now?
Actually, the first time, after we did the quick test, the first time we actually did him with costume and hair and the whole thing, it took us 4 hours, and I said, oh, this is never gonna fly. I really have to get this makeup down. So I thought, well, the more I do it, the faster I'll get. And funny enough, I would go to dailies every day. That's where you see what they shot the day before. And I would go and I thought, okay, well, what step can I leave off that nobody's gonna notice is missing but me? Because I used to put a lot of different colors into his face, and then I realized, you know what, I really don't need to do that. I just need to get the red undertone on the foam latex and start painting it like he's wearing makeup. And that's exactly what I did. And I got it down to 2 hours, and a lovely gentleman named Stefan Dupuis was my assistant on that film. But there was even days that I did it without Stefan, and I still could do it in 2 hours. And even, at one point, Robin says, I kind of like it better when you just do it by yourself. And I said, oh, I don't want to do it by myself every day, Robin. It's even just a little bit of help is something better for me, because it was like, I did that makeup on him 54 times. So that was a lot of times to put the same makeup on somebody day after day, so anyways, but that was that. And he was lovely. You know what I had to do? It's like, he was so animated, I thought, okay, what am I gonna do? Well, I took a door off of a cabinet behind us, so when you look in the mirror, you can see these cabinets up across the way. So I took a door off, we put a monitor in there. Stefan had an extra, check this out, laser disc, that's what was popular back then. He had an extra laser disc player that he brought in, and every day he would bring in like 5 choices of laser discs to play, and Robin would pick out a film. And funny enough, I was really surprised that Robin Williams had seen very few movies. I mean, he hadn't even seen Citizen Kane. I mean, some of these really classic old films. So over the course of the movie, he got a really good film education because he watched a movie every day that I put him in Vegas. And that's how I kept him like this the whole time. Because he would be like talking to people and stuff. And I always said to the ADs, I said, don't be bopping in here every 5 minutes, guys, or it's gonna take me 4 hours again. So just stay the F out. I'll let you know when I'm done, because I'm gonna do it as fast as I possibly can, trust me.
Somebody else that I was noticing too that reoccurred through your career, and I'm guessing it was by his choice a lot, was Danny DeVito.
Absolutely. I met Danny DeVito on Batman Returns, and he and I got along really well, and he asked me to go do this movie with him called Hoffa, which was about, the famous Jimmy Hoffa, who ran the Teamsters Union. And he was doing that right after we did Batman. And when Danny was done on the film, he says, V, you have to come with me. And I said, but the movie isn't over yet. I can't just leave because you're done. And he said, well, we'll see about that. And I went, I thought, what's that supposed to mean? So he went to the producers and he said, I need to take her with me. Can you please help me figure this out? And they did. And I got somebody to replace me to do the rest of the film. And not only did he take me, he took Yolanda Tusing with me, who was the hairstylist on the movie. And we both went off with him. And I got nominated for that film as well that year. This is my favorite story. I got nominated for Batman Returns and Hoffa, both with Danny in them. And I was the other two losers that year. Because Bram Stoker's Dracula won, which was awesome. And funny enough, Greg Canham also did my noses for me for Jimmy Hoffa, so he was nominated for 2 Oscars that year as well. So, anyway, that's that story.
But then Danny brought you along for Junior?
Yes, he brought me on Junior, and Matilda, which was another favorite film of mine to do. That was really fun. And he did something else too, I can't remember. Too many movies to remember.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit too about the teamwork that it takes to be able to put on, just even in your own department, and balancing the deadlines and the egos and the different talent levels of the people that you have there. Are there tips, pointers, stories that you have?
Well, number one, you have to remember that when you're working on a film and you're in the makeup and hair department, you guys are locked up in a little box together. You're in a trailer. So everybody has to get along. That's why it's always really important, I think, for whoever gets hired first on the film, like the makeup artist is usually the first one that gets hired. Hire a hair department, because most of those dames are absolutely batshit crazy. I don't know why. But so it's really important to get a hairstylist that you get along with really well, who will collaborate with you, share knowledge. We have to share all of our information, all of our paperwork. There's so much paperwork now that we have to do. All of our breakdowns, ordering our supplies. I mean, just simple things that you don't even think about. But we all have to, work together and make sure that we stay within our budgets and all that kind of stuff. So that's really important. And then, for instance, like when I got onto Pirates, I had 50 makeup artists working for me, and we were out of the country. So that was a little bit more difficult because you can't really adjust personalities that much because there's so many people. So everybody just has to fight it out. That's the way I look at it, But I hired a background supervisor, and you have to understand, when you're running background on a film like that, you are your own department basically, because you're on another goddamn movie. You've got another 50 pirates that you guys have to make up back there while we're doing 20 principals. So, it really has to, you have to really work, it's a team effort. You all have to work together, They're under me, but they definitely have their own thing to run back there. So they have to make sure that everybody's happy and everybody's getting along. And I mean, even on Pirates, like at one point we had these giant makeup trailers, and I had 10 other makeup artists in another trailer. It was either 8 or 10. It was a big trailer. And there was one guy in there who was a fabulous makeup artist, but he had a very interesting personality, let's just say. And he liked to be sarcastic. He thought it was very funny to mess with people and be sarcastic. And everybody was already sleep deprived and tired and cranky, and here was this guy being a jerk. And finally, I had so many people come and complain about him that I had to fire him. And I said to him, I really like you, you're an incredible makeup artist, but you're so disruptive, I have to let you go, because I said everybody is just over your sense of humor that's not really funny. And I worked with him since then, and he's a great makeup artist. But like, there's just sometimes you just have to, have tough love and say, God damn, dude, you got to work on your personality. You got to know when to keep your mouth shut in a trailer. It's just like reading the trailer. Like for us in the morning, I always tell my assistants, I said, they might not want to have candles going. They might not want to hear music. Maybe they're studying their lines. You have to know, you have to be able to, what I call read the trailer. When an actor comes in, if they're all jovial and talkative, talk to them. If they come in and they're quiet, that means they're in their head. They're studying their lines. They have thousands of words they have to memorize. Just because we're having a great time doesn't mean they're not in turmoil in their head and that they have to figure all this stuff out, So that's reading the room, I call it. That's one of the things.
Well, that's like creatives working with other creatives. They have to have a bit of empathy for what's happening around them, because a creative can get really internal and not understand that the other person has nothing to do with what's happening in your head or what's on your plate that day.
They just want you to do your job, get them ready, make them look right, get them into their character, and let them go do their thing. It's like I did a film with Woody Harrelson where he played Lyndon Baines Johnson, and every morning he wouldn't talk to us, but he would come in and he'd put on these tapes. Lyndon Johnson recorded every single phone conversation he ever had, and Woody would listen to them every morning because he was doing his voice. So he wanted to hear that voice repeatedly, and he just wanted to get that down. And luckily for Woody, he was from Texas, so it was pretty easy for him to fall into it. But that's what he did every morning. So we never talked or played music. We would listen to these whacked out conversations that LBJ had on them. The guy was a nut job. I can't even believe the stuff he would say. It was like, you are so foul. God. Anyways, I won't even repeat half the stuff he said, but yeah. Okay, fine.
So, if we were to ask people who have worked with you in the past what they would say about you as, a co-creative, someone who they worked under, what do you think that they would say about you? Here's a question you've never been asked.
That's a question I've never been asked. Well, I don't know, maybe some people would say I'm kind of tough, but I'm not really. I'm just honest. So I would say, guys, don't ask me a question you don't want to hear the real answer to, because you might not like it, But it's just kind of like when I was on Face Off, it was the same thing. I will always tell you what's good about what you're doing, and then I'll say, but this could be better. And don't just say this could be better. Tell them how to make it better, explain to them what they can do to up their game, Or like, somebody's acting weird, but most of the time everybody said I'm really funny, so I'm really funny at work. I love to have fun. I love my job. And I want everybody to have a good time as well. Like this, I just did a little film for some friends of mine. And I thought, well, I can do anything for 3 weeks. I have never worked so goddamn hard in my life. Jesus Christ. This little independent movie, I never got out of the makeup trailer. I was either making somebody up, taking somebody apart, or painting an effect, or getting some blood rig ready, or doing a fake head or something. It was like nonstop up until the day I left. I was even still putting extras and wigs and beards and mustaches the day I left. So, but I had a gosh darn ball. I had so much fun, and it was so great to be appreciated. They were so happy to have me there. They said, why are you here? How did we ever get you on our movie? I said, because the producer's a friend of mine, and they made me a producer. Not that I don't know what that means, but okay, great, guys. And they said, well, that means you're going to get a percentage at the end. I go, yeah, right, I'll never see that. Jesus Christ, But anyway, I had an absolute ball, and it was so great. It's like I called in favors from everybody I knew, but what came off the best was, it turns out that I went to my friend Howard Berger at K&B. I said, Howard, I'm doing this little non-union movie, and I said, we have a shit ton of effects, and I have no money, basically. And I said, here's a list of the things that I needed. And I said, can you look through all your stuff? And he has catalogs. He has books full of pictures of stuff that he's made. And see if there's anything in there that this will work for. He came up with every single thing I needed. I needed a broken tibia with a bone sticking out, rig, I needed that, he had that. I needed autopsy bodies, he had that. I needed vampire prosthetics, he had those. I needed open cuts that I could sew up, he had those. I mean, everything that I needed, he had. And I said, put a budget together for me and let me see what I can, eke out. And so I told him what my limit was, and he came in under my limit. My friend Steve Laporte, who I won the Oscar for Beetlejuice with, and who I did Lost Boys with, and many other projects. Steve made all of our teeth for us. He also made a set of, for the lead vampire, he made his prosthetics. So everybody just happened to have all this stuff already sculpted, so all we had to do was run prosthetics. So it came out, and I just had a ball doing it. Oh, and then I had to make a fake head. And turns out if you need a silicone head of somebody, that's a good 12 grand right there. Well, that was pretty much my entire budget. So I said, well, I can't do that. So I was talking to a friend of mine who I just happened to run into, and I said, you guys remember Frank Ippolito from Face Off? The troublemaker at the beginning, who's actually a great guy. I said, I ran into Frankie, and he says, I have a scanner, B. And I said, can you scan my actor's head because he's here in town? I said, and what will you charge? Because I won't charge you anything. I said, bitchin'. So I said, well, how much does it cost to get a cast of it, And he said, well, I'll just charge you whatever it costs me to do it. I said, great. And he went back to his lab and he said, what does this guy have to look like? And I said, well, we want to do a thing of him with his eyes open and screaming. And he goes, I have a head of Neil Patrick Harris? He says, I have a head already made of Neil Patrick Harris, but his eyes are closed, but he's screaming. And I went, really? And I said, maybe I can just use that. How much would that cost? He goes, $300. I said, bitchin'. Okay, so he poured me up a head of Neil Patrick Harris. And I'll be darned, by the time I was done with that head, it looked so much like my guy, it was unbelievable. I put a wig on it, I put facial hair pieces on it, I put the teeth in, the prosthetics on, painted him just like the guy in my movie, and we had to do a decapitated head. That was the whole thing. He gets his head lopped off. I have shots of the actor holding the head with him next to it, and it looks just like him, and it's not even him. I was so proud of myself. I was like, yeah, I did that. Yeah. So that was good for me.
So Face Off, for people that don't know, was actually a reality competition show for makeup artists. And all of the episodes are now on Netflix, so make sure you catch up with those, right? Netflix?
Thank you. Yeah, Netflix, yeah. I don't know if all the episodes are on there, but quite a few of them are. And I was rewatching them. I forgot, oh my God, there was some really good stuff on there I totally forgot about. How many of you have not seen Face Off? Raise your hands. Okay, you're fired.
It's a really, really fun show.
It's a fun show, and it's like, what's so great about it is like the whole family can watch it. And I've had parents come up to me and say, you know what, because of that show, my kids aren't afraid to watch spooky movies anymore. And they know how stuff's done, and it kind of helps them understand what they're watching and be able to enjoy it without getting the bejesus scared out of them, you know what I mean? So, and it's just really good camaraderie. They would help each other. It's like a competition show, but the artists who were like supposed to be pitted against each other would still help each other get their molds open, get their stuff done, because they didn't want to see their cohorts and their fellow artists not be able to finish their work, So that was also a really cool thing. But
Well, and it was a good show that showed the creative process from beginning to end. Here's the challenge. You have so much time to do it. That's your deadline.
Yeah.
How are you going to make this happen and please the judges at the same time?
Yeah, exactly.
I.e. the producers and the directors.
Right, yeah. So it was a fun show.
Yeah, it's really cool. So
Got
if
any
you haven't
other
seen
horrible
it,
questions to ask me?
oh yeah,
good.
we do have a couple of microphones in the audience. So if you guys have some questions from the audience, we'll field them up here. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Say your name first and then.
Hi, my name is Neva. Obviously, you created the Lost Boys vampire face that has inspired basically every single vampire, everything that we've seen since then. What is something that is new, that like a new sculpt that you've seen come out that you're excited to see grow in the FX community?
What was that again? What does
What's a new sculpt that you've seen in the industry that you're excited to see grow in the community?
I don't even know. There's so much new stuff out there. I couldn't even begin to talk about that. there's so many new fabulous effects makeup artists out there right now that are so good.
Yeah.
They do such incredible work. And now, the cool thing about it is most of them do all of their sculpting in ZBrush now. And they print everything. And pretty soon they're going to be able to print prosthetics, which is unbelievable to me. But now they don't even make molds anymore. They 3D print all their molds. They 3D print their sculptures. They do scans of the artist. They don't even have to take life casts anymore, because a life cast, you always have that little bit of a drag because the alginate gets so heavy, so it drags the face down. And if you take a life cast, like a current life cast of somebody, and then you put it next to a scan, you can see actually how distorted the face is. You don't notice it so much when you don't have a comparison, but when you have the comparison, it's amazing to see the distortion on an actual life cast compared to actually scanning. So, they want the actual live cast because it does give them all the pore structure and all that, but for the actual casting, they'll take it off of that and put it onto the actual scan so that they get a much better defined piece for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm really short. I'm Deb, and my question is, has there ever been a movie that you look back at and you're just like, man, I wish I could have done that? Because as an artist, there's things that I want to do, but it's always just like, oh man, I should have done that, or I really wish I could have done that. Something that you were excited about.
There's two things that I always wanted that I wish I would have done, and one of them I just got a bucket list on. So that was really awesome because Bill Corso, who used to work for me a lot, he's a huge makeup artist on his own, and he just finished the movie Michael, about Michael Jackson. And my one regret was that when they were shooting Thriller, I was not available to go work on Thriller with Rick Baker. And I always was bummed out that I never got to work on it because I was doing a TV show called The A-Team.
Also legendary.
And I was doing all of George Papard's disguises, so I couldn't replace myself because every damn prosthetic makeup artist was working on Thriller. So I was always bummed out that I couldn't go to work on Thriller, but because they just did this Michael Jackson movie, I got an email one day from Bill Corso that says, V, I have a thrilling proposition for you. And I went, so I got to go work on the recreation of the Thriller video on the new Michael Jackson movie. And that was just so much fun. And it was really great because we shot in the exact same location they did the original one in, and we replicated the exact makeups for that, which were absolutely dreadful. And so we tried to make a better match and make them look a little bit better than some of them did back then. But it was really cool because Rick Baker came down with his whole family, and it was really great to have him there on the set. And it was just so much fun. The movie is going to be spectacular, I think, because I happened to be there because we did that Thriller stuff last. I got to be there for the wrap party day that they had, and they showed a video of the film, like a teaser reel. And it's just amazing. Bill Corso does the makeup on Michael Jackson's nephew, who plays Michael, and the kid looks like him and he sings just like Michael. He's actually doing his own singing in the movie, and it's going to be phenomenal. It gave me the chills. It almost brought tears to my eyes. It's going to be so good. So that was really fun to see. But anyway, that was the first thing. That was the first thing. The second one, well, actually, that was the first one. I got a phone call from Ian Bryce, who I had worked with on the Batman films, and he says, V, I have a script I want to send you to read. I would like you to do the movie. And I said, okay. So I got the script and I read it, and I thought, oh my God, this is the best script I've ever read. But I think it would be better if a man did the makeup on this movie. And I thought, well, yeah, I think it would be better. So I called Ian up and I said, you know what, Ian? I said, because this takes place in prisons and it's all men, I said, I think you should have a man makeup artist. So I told him to call Kevin Haney, and Kevin Haney wound up doing the film. Well, the next year when that film came out, it was called The Shawshank Redemption. And it was the best, it was my favorite movie that came out that entire year, and I was so bummed out that I didn't do the movie, but I still think I made the proper choice because there was only one woman on the entire set, and I was still young and quite pretty. party, and I thought, that probably wouldn't have been a very good choice to be hanging out with all those cons, So, anyways, but that was the other bummer. So, and that will never, I'm never going to be able to do anything about that, but it was my favorite movie that came out that year. So that was my only one regret, I think, that I didn't do. All the other ones, I think everybody, with all the special makeups, I think everybody did such a spectacular job with their own films. I don't think I have any regrets anywhere along the line. I'm sorry, that was very long-winded, so we should let
Thank you.
somebody.
Hi, Evie. I'm Rachel. It's kind of a weird question to ask, but what are your top favorite 3 films that you've worked on?
That's a tough one because I've got to do so many cool movies. I don't even know if I could name them all. I mean, I really, when I was much younger, I used to think Lost Boys was my favorite film I ever worked on because it was just so much fun. We had such a great time working on it. But, then I did Mrs. Doubtfire, and I did all these other films, and I did the pirate movies, and I thought, oh my God, there couldn't be anything better than to be on a ship full of pirates. I mean, come on, So I don't know. I don't know. And then I did The Hunger Games, which was such a ball with all those young people, and that movie was really good for a makeup artist because we got to do everything from high fashion makeups to, war-torn, people dying in hospitals, and it was like we did everything that you ever learned as a makeup artist to do was in that movie from A to Z. What if you could have named it, we did it in those movies. So that was really good. So there's 3. There's 3. But there was more. There was more. I mean, there was so many more.
Thank you so much.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate your work.
Now, it looks like we have time for one more question, sir.
You guys can come and talk to me at my booth if you want, who didn't get to ask.
Afternoon, Lee. I'm Joel. I want to rewind the clock back to Mrs. Doubtfire, and I have kind of a 2-part question. One, during the montage of the film, did you have to make all those prosthetics, and were there more that weren't shown on film?
I don't know that there was more. No, I don't think so. We shot that over 2 days, but that was like we used stock appliances that Greg just happened to have sitting around. We just popped them on him and did. We thought, okay, well, we can do, like a Barbara Streisand with this one. We can do like a gypsy kind of chick with this one, and we just stuck different noses on them and whatever, and played around. It was fun.
And let Robin go.
Yeah, let Robin go, exactly.
And then,
let him go.
Then another part of the movie, when the prosthetic falls out the window and is run over by the truck, did that actually get run over? Or did you have to paint tire treads on?
I believe we painted those on, but that's not the makeup he wore. That's just the thing that we showed that he wore because he actually had a 9-piece prosthetic on. But we just made that full face thing for him to, so it looks like that's what he puts on every day, which of course, in fact, we knew that wasn't what he wore.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the amazing